Hi guys, in this week's tutorial I'll be showing you how I paint Chaos Space Marine in the Emperor's Children colors. As usual, I start off with a base coat of Chaos Black from my metal can, and I then start off using cold grey and block in all the panels that I want to be pink in the end. I do this to provide for a nice base color for the next layer of Warlord Purple to cover on. Having this cover on pure black will take like 8 layers. I still apply this in 2 thin layers to get nice coverage. Once the Warlord Purple is dry, I take Carroburg Crimson and wash all the purple parts. I do this to achieve a nice contrast between the trims on the model and the actual purple parts. Then I take the Warlord Purple again and I carefully paint in the armor panels. I make sure I leave the shadow we created with the Carroburg Crimson visible. Again, I applied this in 2 coats to get good coverage. After this, I made a mixture of 1 part Warlord Purple and 1 part Squid Pink, and I applied a first rough base highlight to the armor panels that are going to be pink. I make sure a little bit of the Warlord Purple from the previous layer stays visible towards the shadow areas on the model. By adding 1 part Squid Pink to this mixture, I repeat the process. Again, I leave a little bit of the previous layer visible, and I do this in 2 coats where needed. Then using pure Squid Pink, I again go over the pink parts on the model, and I try and stay further inwards on all the pink parts to get a transition in the color. Then, making a mixture of 2 parts Squid Pink and 1 part white, I apply a final highlight, and I only apply this to the most visible edges and areas on the model. Next, using steel, I'm gonna block in all the trimmings on the model. The parts like the vents on the backpack and the joints in the hips and the knees, on the backside of the knees, are not painted in this color. Now I use gunmetal and I paint all the leftover metallic parts that I want to actually paint metallic color. Once the gunmetal is dry, I use non-oil and wash both the steel parts and the gunmetal parts. I'm not that worried if I hit the black parts. As for the steel parts, it might need 2 coats because the wash didn't really wanted to stay on the steel parts. So I went over it a couple of times where needed. Once the non-oils dry, I take out the gunmetal again and I gently highlight the gunmetal parts. Leave this more to like an edge highlight instead of going all over the parts again. Then using steel again, I do the same thing to all the parts that are steel. I wanted to create some variation in the model, so I decided to do some parts golden, and I use Victorian brass for that. I just block those parts in. Once that's dry, I highlight it with thin edge highlights and a dry brush on these ripped parts with silver. Using Seraphim Sepia, I then wash all these golden parts. This color will make 2 things happen actually. It will create a shade in the Victorian brass, and it will turn the silver color into a more gold-like color, in which it starts acting like a highlight. Then using black, I'm going to paint all the black armor black again. This is not just cleaning up, you really need to do all the black armor, because the Rattlecan black and this black are different colors of black. Then using medium sea gray, I apply an edge highlight to the black areas. Next, using earth, I'm gonna block in the 2 little horns on the head of the Space Marine. Once that's dry, it's followed by a wash of Agrax Earthshade. Next, I make a mixture of earth and bone white in a 1:1 ratio, and I apply a highlight to the horns. And I do this with little stripes from the bottom to the top, or the top to the bottom, just how you like it. But I don't go all the way to the bottom. You actually want them to become thinner towards the bottom. Once that's dry, I repeat this process using bone white, going over the previous stripes, but going not as far down as on the previous layer. Then using dead white, I block in the eye sockets and the eyes. Then using Escort Painter Green, I go over the white areas in the eyes. I use the white before the green to get good coverage on the green. Then using again that white, I paint in the actual eye, or better the lens on the Space Marine, of course. This is then followed by a thin layer of yellow. Now we get a glowing eye effect. Then for the grip of the sword, I use cold gray to block it in. Make sure you don't hit the black. And once that's dry, I take Nuln oil and I wash the grip of the blade. Try not to spill over. If it happens, not that big of a deal. But if the area gets too big, it will show from a distance. Once the Nuln oil is dry, I take the cold gray again and I apply a highlight to all the ribs on the handle of the blade. This is then followed by a thin edge highlight of Stonewall Grey. Next, using dark green, I just paint the entire blade of the sword. I did 2 coats to get a nice coverage of the dark green. This is then followed by a highlight, pretty rough highlight, made of a mixture of 1 part dark green and 1 part livery green. I make sure I leave the deep recesses dark green, and basically the rest of the blade is getting painted with this layer. As you can see, I did a couple of layers to get the color nice and vibrant. I repeat this process by adding 1 part livery green to the previous mixture. And basically I do the same thing again, but leaving a little bit of the previous layer visible. And I try to stay away from the furthest bottom of the blade to create transition in this green color. Next, using pure livery green, I again repeat the same process but going further upwards on the blade. And most of these layers, they require 2 to 3 goes to get a bit of decent coverage on the model. As you can see, I stay further up the blade than with the previous layer. Again, this is to create a transition in the color. Next, I make a mixture of 1 part livery green and 1 part dead white. And I apply this in an edge highlight manner on the top of the blade. I also apply little bits to the outer edges of the cutting end of the blade. Then, using pure dead white, I paint a little thingy in in the middle of the blade. I also apply a really thin edge highlight on the upside of on the top of the blade, on all the sharpest areas. Then using Moon Yellow again, I'm going to paint the, well, let's call it thingy yellow. After this I took the model outside for a dull coat, and once dry I finished it up, including the basing and the weathering powder on the basing. After that I took Tamiya Clear X22 and I covered the blade with a good coat of it. And this is the finished product. So I hope you liked this video. Please like, share and comment. If you didn't like the video, dislike the video, but please be kind enough to let me know what you didn't like. So thanks for watching and see you next time.